Action.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Jim, what we've been doing, as you may know, is we've been trying to catch as many of our older members to really capture their experiences with the club, and it ends up being a conversation. I know when I first approached Jeff McQueen, he was a little reluctant. He said, I might say something that gets someone upset, and I said, well, through the conversation we can try to avoid that.
Yeah.
And basically, it's ended up really, I mean, for me being a relative newcomer, it's really been educational to learn about this, and everyone has a little, different story. But basically, we like to start off by just, you might, tell us when you joined the club and a little bit about the background of you getting connected with Corinthian, and then
Sure.
we'll get into more detail after that.
Great. Well, so I'm going to start out with what is one of my favorite photographs.
Wow.
I don't know if you don't get this, but anyway, this photo is from 1956. And the boat is a bear boat,
Right.
which in '56 was the biggest one design class on the bay. So the boat was purchased by, I grew up in Orinda, and my father, from a young age, he grew up in Southern California. He was crazy about the water. I've got all his genes, and so at a cocktail party, a neighbor of ours, who was a delightful guy and had money, he says to my father, "Hey, I bought a sailboat." He knew nothing about sailing, but he bought a boat. This is the boat.
Wow.
And the bear boats were great. They still are great sailing craft, designed for the bay, built in Sausalito. And so over cocktails, of course, my father says, "Well, what kind of a boat is it?" "Well, it's a bear boat." "Well, we should change the name to Godiva." Bear boat. And so they did. So they got the boat, put Godiva on the stern, and three of us, my father and I and the owner, competed in the bareboat class for 2 years. And we did well in one race.
So it's very, very competitive.
It was amazingly competitive. And, there were great sailors at San Francisco, St. Francis, Richmond, and it was the usual suspects. But I was hooked. I mean, after that, I do want to point out that my father, to do this, he purchased a set of World War II surplus foul weather gear, but he didn't buy any for me. And of course, in the cockpit, my dad was in the stern driving, and then the owner sat next to him, and then I sat in the front catching all the spray.
You get pretty wet on that boat.
Very wet,
Right.
very wet. So, but regardless, I was hooked. That's all I wanted to do ever since.
And you were, how old were you?
13,
13.
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So I've been at it.
Did you ever get a bear boat of your own later on?
No. I owned a Cal 20 initially, and didn't compete very much with that. But well, sort of the next important thing that happened was in competing on the bear boat, Corinthian was, as now, then, very well established and substantial club. And they ran, as we do now, ran regattas. And so Corinthian hosted one of the bareboat regattas, and it was a 2-day regatta. So and that's why we were anchored in here. We laid over for Saturday night on 13. I couldn't go in the club.
Right.
Because everybody in there was having a high old time. But I remember, hanging out on Godiva and looking at this club and thinking, not only am I going to go sailing, but I'm going to join that club
Wow.
someday.
Interesting.
Someday.
Interesting.
So, so from
It happened, yeah.
56 to 93, I eventually became Commodore.
No, so you joined in 81.
81,
You
right.
joined in 81, and like you said, it was just because that's what you wanted to do, and
Yeah.
you always knew that.
Yeah, that's right. It
And
was
then,
no question.
So you joined as a
Racing member.
racer. Okay.
Yeah. And I will divulge something. It was, at that time, it was kind of promotional. And I think I may have paid, I don't know, $300 initiation fee. And of course, with time, you're supposed to step up and pay the rest. I never have.
So now you're a life member.
And I left members too late.
You missed
It's too late, so I can talk about it now.
Were you familiar with any other clubs sailing? Being in the East Bay, like, did you sail out of Berkeley, or did you?
I did. I'm a graduate of UC engineering school, and so while I was there, and as an alum, I used to use the Cal Sailing Club
Sure.
boats, which are kept down at the marina. So I was pretty familiar with the marina. And before that, in high school, I was a Sea Scout, Sea Explorer, and our somewhat funky ship, quote unquote, was docked at Berkeley.
Berkeley.
Yeah. So I was pretty familiar with that.
Yeah.
I was born at Berkeley too. So.
Yeah, me too.
So
Yeah.
how was so when you decided to become a member,
Yeah.
was that a point in your life where you said, now I can do it, or was it I mean,
Yes.
what made you at that time say, since it was something you always wanted to do,
Yeah.
what made you in 81
What
say,
put it over the
yeah,
finish line?
I'm doing it?
So let's think. So I was in between marriages. Divorced my first wife in '78, and and when you have one of those moments, you sort of think, I'm going to rearrange things. So I got a good buddy, fraternity brother from Santa Barbara who lived in San Francisco, and I convinced him that we should buy a boat and go racing. So I bought a Wilderness 21, which is a cute little boat.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember the name.
Remember the boat?
I remember the boat. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a class of them actually for a while on the bay, designed by Chuck Burns, and so we bought that, and I said, now we got to belong to a club for racing. I said, I know what club we should belong to. So we came over here, got space on the deck, kept it, dry sailed it.
Right.
And that was the beginning. I mean, from then, this was, obviously it was 81, it's just been nonstop.
Yeah.
Well, you're still, obviously, you're still out there
Yeah.
sailing and on the, it's not that the boat has become 40, 50 footer, you're still on the little guy, the little fast guys.
Yeah. I mean, Express 27 is a fabulous, absolutely fabulous boat. And it's simple, it's lightweight, it's fast, it's exciting. And I never had the, I've over time had 4 children, 3 of them with expensive private university educations and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
you do a lot of things, and I was fortunate just to kind of keep my hand in the racing thing. I passionately believe in small boat, one design racing. I just think it's the best way to sail,
Yeah.
hands down.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. So Jim, so you became a member and you went sort of the regular way. We have interviewed some who, they crawled over the fences, and finally somebody said, stop doing that.
You're going to have to join.
But you sort of sound like I did it
Oh, yes.
the sort of the way it should be done.
Yeah.
So
well, I'm a Navy guy, so
okay.
squared away, as they say.
So there's not that many years between when you became a member and then when you became Commodore. How did you get into that whole cycle?
That's a good question. There's a story there too. So, I joined in '81, and all I wanted to do, other than being here, was to go sailing. So I rarely came into the clubhouse. I'd just come down, boat in the water, go out, boom, 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 which is largely what I do now. And then I met and married my second wife, current wife, Martha, and she, early on, we had this funny conversation. She said, well, do you have friends at the club? I thought, well, I know 2 or 3 guys, Peter Hogg being one of them. And, well, don't you think you should get to know more people? Well, yeah, sure, but, all I have to do is just hang out with the dry sail, small boat guys, I'm fine. Well, it's a community, you should, anyway. And so she said, you should get involved. So, okay, so I happened to be chatting with Bob Turnbull, who had, at the time he may have been treasurer, but he certainly had paid his dues as treasurer. And he, learned that I'm an investment banker, blah, 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 and he thought, aha.
That's one.
Yeah.
There's a catch.
Yeah, so he says, well, look, you want to get involved. He says, why don't you become treasurer? 1 meeting a month. All I have to do is just make a little report, and that's it. And you get to meet people on the board and blah, blah, blah. I thought, well, all right. I mean, I was pretty busy in my career, but.
What year was that, actually? I'm sorry.
Let me think. So that's, that was probably, it's either 86 or 87, right in there. Because I married Martha in 86, so that was, she got things going. Well, Turnbull was a sneaky guy because the finances of the club were basically a disaster. It was just a mess.
Right.
And so, so I kind of studied things and thought, we're probably going to have a dues increase. We're going to have to do something. And while I was mulling that over, I actually did a PowerPoint presentation for the board and did another one for the annual meeting, as trying to get some awareness going here that maybe something needed to be done. And then the IRS came in and said, you guys have been in violation of the law. You've had all of these outside events that you declared as member events, which means you don't have to pay
Falls
tax.
inside the tax exempt status.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And they said, we're going to, private club, we're going to drag you guys through the mud. Hang on, because we're going to make your life miserable. I thought, oh, great. So there ensued several months of meetings with these examiners from the IRS, and we basically had no defense. I mean, it was just black and white. But I went to a lot of effort to be very open and come look at everything. And our general manager, Anna Peachy, and our bookkeeper just really pitched in, and so we we sort of, I think in that manner convinced these examiners that we would do everything we could to straighten this out.
Yeah, this wasn't with malice aforethought. And did did Bob stay help you on this, or did you was it foisted?
Well, it was mostly foisted. Although I'm not sure he was fully aware of how screwed up things were. It's because I like Turnbull.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah, and I never had any complaints about him. But anyway, there we were. So you know, we managed to mostly just by being honest and charming, managed to talk them down. What were the numbers? Originally, they were going to fine us $300,000, and I think they got it down to 100. I don't know, but we ended up having to assess the membership.
I was going to ask. So you did have to do an assessment.
We did.
Yep.
Yeah, we did. And
Yeah.
it wasn't really, I remember the assessment, but it wasn't really that shockingly bad.
No, it was like, I don't know, a couple $100 per member.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't, but I remember
Did you simultaneously need to raise the dues?
That part, my memory's not too clear on that. We did get the finances in better shape, so we must, you can either cut expenses or raise revenue. We probably did a little of each.
Right.
And one way that we actually, within a not too long period of time, we actually transformed the operation of the club to dramatically improve the food, the social activities, recruiting, outside events. That was really sort of the big thing.
Right.
And you remember Alain Martin Puree?
Oh yeah. Of course.
in the process, and this is an exercise. So by the time we're at this point, I was no longer the treasurer. I'd become a director, and then went on the flag. And rather than becoming rear commodore, I was never rear commodore. The person who had been rear and was moving into vice, basically the powers that be decided he wasn't up to the task. And so I immediately became vice commodore, which basically kind of puts you in charge of the business.
Right.
And so that was, and my good friend Greg Quilici was the commodore.
Oh, okay.
And he is, I don't know how well you know him, but he's a very smart, very good businessman.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
he's absolutely terrific. And so I was, his number two, and we needed the food service was just horrible in the club, and so it was actually his idea, but we did it together. We went to the owner of the Casa Madrona Hotel, which was a pretty well-run
Sure.
place with good food, and said, can we talk to you about your under contract coming in and doing the food in the club? He said, sure, as long as they get the liquor. No. So it took a few meetings to tell him no.
That's the holy grail of the club.
Absolutely, absolutely. We do that. So, cool. So anyway, that result, so Alain worked for him at Casa Madrona, and he said,
That's right. Yeah.
he says, I'm going to give you a very clever guy, very creative, which was absolutely true. He came in, solved the food problem, hired in the right people, got the right menus, the operation got cleaned up, and the thing that was really sort of most beneficial about our bringing him in is that He's terrific at organizing and throwing parties. I mean, just a genius.
I mean, the gym, yeah.
It was
It
amazing.
changed everything.
Everything.
It
Yeah.
changed, I mean, it was fantastic.
It was
I don't
fun.
want to compare it to what we have now, but it was,
Yeah. Well, to the
Fantastic.
ever since then.
I mean, it was
You know.
just incredible.
Well,
He
that
had
was
a new
evident
theory.
when we went through a lot of the pictures and the albums, that the theme parties especially, where everyone really got into it. And that had to be a real transition because, you know, I would imagine the way it sounded is there was more, the club was a little more bifurcated between people that might want to do some social stuff, but the people that were really here to sail and to race. And this, it seems like it created a bit more of a balance, you know. And I don't want to get ahead of us, but also along the way, like a lot of private clubs, they started to recognize women.
Right. Well, I have a story about that too.
Well, I just want to ask you, because there's a lot that happened when,
Yeah.
when you
As,
were.
as I think about
No,
it.
there was really a lot that happened when you were Commodore, or, you know, before and after, and Martha was Women's Auxiliary, as it was called at that time, and there's a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of changes due to also women. Women were sort of becoming more, breaking the, what do you call it, the
The
glass
ceiling.
ceiling.
Yes.
Glass
And,
ceiling.
Yes.
and I know that between you and Martha, that was changes. And it was that, how did that come about? I was president of the Women's Auxiliary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I was the last president under the name of
Mhm.
the Women's Auxiliary. It was also at the time where we did not have regular spousal memberships.
Yeah. Because I created that.
So
Yeah.
take it from there.
Yeah.
How,
Okay.
how did all of that really happen?
Evolve.
Right. Well, first of all, I've had this belief that we need full participation by women in business and everything, because they're hugely talented and they've been were shut out. So, so you just start out. That's kind of where I came from, and so. I mean, I chuckle because this was quite an adventure. But I thought, you know, one way to just immediately boost the standing of women in the club was to basically change the regular membership to couples. And
Okay.
so there was, I wish I could remember the name of the guy who was the club counsel, the attorney at the time, because he was nuts, but he got it right away. And I said, look, you know, why don't we just create a new type of membership where it's for families and couples, but where either the man or the woman can exercise the vote and can hold office and can go up the flag.
Right.
You know, just even it out. And I mean, it was pretty easy to draft up. It's a simple idea. And so he drafted it up, and the flag, I mean, it was my flag, so I had
Did
some
this-
influence, and we just put it through.
Was this something that had to go to a vote of membership, though?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. So
Oh, yeah.
that was the fun part. So, yeah, so, you know, at the end of my term, I was only Commodore for 1 year. At the end of my term, on the agenda and sent out in the packet to everybody was this proposal. And there were a number of people, men, who thought this was really not acceptable.
Yeah.
And so I'll just never forget, at the meeting, and this is when we still had an open bar, you know, upstairs before the meeting.
Before.
Yes. And so finally I get up to introduced the measure, and 2 or 3, long-standing male members, all with a good heat on, they actually marched up, got right in my face,
Oh, gosh.
and there's, their
You could have been in the House of
saliva
Parliament.
was flying around. Oh man, I just, I let them
Well,
vent.
it happened, but for a lot of the females, it took quite a while because you had to fill out a form.
Oh.
And it took quite a while for some women to even do it, because you kind of went up against your husband, because there were a lot of the male members at that
Right.
time who were not really for this.
Oh no.
And
Yeah.
Well, that
Yeah.
evening that you did this, was a vote taken,
Oh yeah.
and how did
It
it go?
passed.
it passed.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It passed. But it was not.
But not by a landslide.
No.
And did we lose some members as a result of that?
I don't know. We might have it. I wasn't.
It wasn't
I wasn't
mentioned.
aware of it. The thing
Yeah.
that I remember, ironically, is that, and I wish I could remember the full detail, but Charlie White, who was a rock solid guy, there was something happening about that time where he needed to be at a coming board membership meeting for some purpose, and he was going to be out of the country. And he said, Gibbs, I'm really glad that you did this, because now, my vote, that is his wife's vote,
Jenny?
will carry. Yeah, yeah. I don't know what it was, but I've never forgotten that.
So she had proxy in effect,
Yeah.
and that way he didn't lose his vote. And wow,
So I think this was about. That was about the same time as, and that was a major.
Sure.
And there were some in between, some words flying like, who do we think we are, us women, that now we have to also become members. But that was about the same time, and I know Martha was behind being on the Corinthian Women, or the Women's Auxiliary, to change the name.
Yes.
And that happened about the
Same time.
same time.
Yeah.
Yes, it did, and
that would have made sense. Yeah.
she actually mentioned that when we were driving today. She said, make sure that the full story of this evolution of the role of women in the club, is fleshed out. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I've heard know very little actually, but Martha was very much behind,
Right.
restating what this. It's not an auxiliary. It's women.
Yeah.
And which is terrific. There were others who were very much involved. Laura Kell was one. I think Chris Canada was, undoubtedly involved in that. But you should talk to Martha.
Yeah,
And there are
no,
probably others too.
Because I was still, as I said, president, auxiliary, and Martha, she was on that board.
Yeah.
So she took over after. I think she was president together with Laura Kell.
I think that's right. That's why she mentioned that. Probably.
And then they sort of rolled it from there.
Yeah.
And but that was again one of these.
Well, it was a significant internal rebranding of the club,
Right.
and changing an auxiliary always sort of suggests secondary, or you're not.
Yeah.
So that was really important to do it at the same time. Otherwise, it looks like you won a battle, but you still lost the war
Right.
by having it as an auxiliary.
Yeah.
Then I remember too, because the financial situation was one thing at that time, was not the happiest. And another thing, our membership had gone down, but that was still, as we said, regular members. That's what I read in Telltales.
Right.
That it was in your report, the regular membership had gone below 300.
Oh, wow.
And so, we're talking about maybe having a membership drive.
Yeah.
And
Which
I
we did
remember-
it. We did it
We,
a few
we,
times.
well, we did it in '97, and I was membership chair at that time.
Yeah.
But in order to become membership chair, because we were changed to regular spousal, I had to become a regular spousal, and Peter was still the regular member. So I had to change to a regular spousal, and otherwise I could not be chair of the membership committee.
Wow.
So it was, you know, so
Well, this is,
Right.
this is
It-
good stuff.
Well,
it is good stuff,
Oh, yeah.
because that was a change.
Yeah.
That you had to be a member.
Yeah, right.
It had to be interesting drafting this because, you know, it was such a tantric shift that you have to think that there would likely be some unintended consequences. For instance,
How do you know?
had they figured out what the policy was going to be if the husband, presuming he was the member in name, predeceased the wife, what would happen there?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It was
Under the old structure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
well, then they did under the old structure, as far as I remember. Either you were not here anymore, or you could be granted a special social membership. It's in the bylaw.
No
Yeah.
vote.
But
Yeah.
you know, no.
which again, you know, suggested, you know, you're still subservient and you're
Yep.
still a lesser member of the club, and so that had to be, you know, a hurdle to get over.
Yeah.
But Jim, another thing too, you know, in the late '90s, there were lots of changes. The harbor.
Mm.
I mean,
Oh,
that
boy.
was a big thing too.
Oh, yes, the harbor.
But the harbor, you know, our slips that they were privately, I mean not private, they were owned by members, not the
Some of them
club.
were not owned by members.
Yeah.
I mean, were owned by non-members.
Non-members.
So then,
Crazy.
I mean, that reverted to, now the club became the harbor became part of Corinthian Yacht Club, not
Yes.
kind of like a separate.
Yeah.
And you were that's in some of your telltales too.
Oh, yeah. No, I got really pretty heated about the harbor. Yeah, first of all, the harbor, well, going back to this picture, there is no harbor.
There's no,
There wasn't
Right.
anything.
Right.
It was just an anchorage.
Right.
And so the harbor was created and constructed by a group of members who created a separate company.
Right.
You know, it had nothing to do with the club.
Right.
And they figured out the financing and whatever. You know, it was very important. And that's probably in the '60s. It was a long time
it
ago.
was before, Peter came in '69, and that was, you
It
know,
was-
that was
it was
there.
there.
Oh, yeah, that
Yeah,
was there.
yeah.
So did the Corinthian have to pay a fee? Did they lease that space or?
Nope. So point number one, important historical event. You know, members created a separate company and built the harbor, and they created the business structure, which was, you know, the slips were owned individually, and there was, you know, you had to pay slip fees.
And this is a for-profit business that they created.
Well, it was. I don't think they paid any dividends.
Oh,
You know, to the owners, but you got a slip in a brand new harbor. And so, you know, several decades passed with this structure, and the harbor was, in particular the breakwater, was not well maintained.
Right.
Didn't stand up over time. And the other thing that was, you know, a real irritant to some members of the club, including me, is that a lot of the slips came under the ownership of non-members, just
Yeah.
with the evolution of time. And because if you owned a slip, you could sell it to somebody else.
Yeah.
among other things.
And it didn't have necessarily have anything to do, any connection with the club.
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
Right.
Well, so some people owned slips and rented them out and kept the money. You know, contributed nothing to a maintenance fund.
Right.
That was I think the biggest problem.
Was it the company that was created, was it their responsibility to maintain the harbor?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't.
They didn't.
So what were they called? Did they?
It was the harbor
The
company.
Harbor Company.
Yeah.
So that was the name, the Harbor Company.
So they were taking in this revenue, but they weren't putting it back into the proper maintenance of the
No.
harbor.
And so when I was Commodore, and immediately thereafter, after my term of Commodore ended, we had created the catering company. That's
Right.
we being is his Quilich's idea. I followed his leadership. But, so I became the president of the catering company for 3 years after I was Commodore, to just keep the thing going. And so I was around, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
paying attention somewhat. And I thought the situation in the harbor, I mean, it was untenable. You know, it was not, something was going to happen, it was going to go wrong. And I was pretty vocal,
Right.
saying, you guys got to straighten this out.
Did you, during that time, since the Harbor Committee was an outside company, you really didn't have the clear demarcation between the Port Committee and the Harbor?
Yeah, there was no port committee.
There was no port.
Well, there was a port captain, which, you know, had nothing to do with the harbor
Right.
or the port.
Yeah.
It was all what it
The
mostly
house.
consists of, which is taking care
Yeah,
of
the
building.
facility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, you know, it's just, you know, to be honest with you, there's some people whose pictures are on the wall in there who were the officers of the Harbor Company, in addition to being prominent members of the club.
Possible conflict of interest.
Oh man! And I got into some heated. It was getting pretty bitter.
Yeah.
And so anyway, what transformed the situation was a big southern storm, which actually caved in the seawall. The seawall was wooden pilings, and you could just touch it; it would fall over. And so a good southern blow came in and just destroyed it. And the Harbor Company had no money to repair it. They couldn't do anything. So the club agreed to take it over. And
When they agreed to do that, was there a stipulation that if we're going to do this, we should control the harbor as well? Or?
oh, completely.
Yeah.
It became property of the club.
Right.
What?
And people who owned slips were out.
Right.
If you own one, you know, you can rent it from us,
Uh-huh.
but you're not getting any money for it
Right.
because you blew this.
And what happened to the harbor company that had been created? Was it just dissolved?
Dissolved. Yeah. No
Yeah,
longer
and I think
interested.
there was, I mean, I know that there were members who had rented a slip from
Outside owners.
outside owners.
Yeah.
And
gosh.
then when it was turning back, they could buy the slip. Or the owner would ask for a price for the slip. And then,
There were a few.
and then it went back to the club. So it was sort of like giving $8,000 to somebody, but then you didn't get anything for
No.
it.
And there
because-
were a few, you know, just unfortunate people, members of the club,
Right.
who bought a slip, you know, on the market, so to speak,
And
and it just evaporated,
wow.
wasted money.
But I remember too, because in '97, that's when we had that big membership drive
Mm-hmm.
where initiation fees was waived. It was like you could give a gift certificate, which was a membership in the Corinthian Yacht Club, to a friend. And it was very successful. And one of the reasons it was successful was because that was right at the time with the slips, so there were slips available
Yeah.
in the club. So there were a lot of the members from '97 that actually became members under that program, no initiation fee, and got a slip right away.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, who was Commodore when all of this was happening? Was it after Greg?
I'd have to go look at the.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
There was you,
Well, it
and
was
there was
Kel, Hogg.
Kel Hogg, and then, I mean, the harbor, you know, that was, then it became Jeff McQueen, kind of right, you know, the 2000.
Right, and McQueen, he and Culver sort of took over the construction of the new seawall.
That's what I thought.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, they erected a monument to themselves. The plaque is out at the foot of the ramp. You could read it for having accomplished all that.
Were the Pelicans around then? Were they involved?
The
the
Pelicans have been around for
They have been-
a very long time.
Yeah.
But they were not really the harbor, they were still more the
Structure of the facility.
structure.
Yeah,
or
it was
were the-
it's volunteer labor
Yeah,
to maintain
right,
the club,
right,
and
right.
it was. There were some real craftsmen that belonged to this club, contractors. I
Right.
mean, for a while, that was an important thing.
Sure,
Not anymore.
sure.
Except on the port committee.
So when the new breakwater was constructed, what was the situation relative to what the estimated cost was going to be and what the actual cost was going to be? Was that an issue?
That I do not remember, but you know the club financed it.
Yeah, and you had to have it.
Borrowed money to build it.
Yeah.
They had to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
What else?
I mean, that's what they did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because I think, what was his name? Anyway, he has a boat on the A line right now. Wells Fargo banker.
Oh, Herb
Yeah, Herb Myers. I think
Myers,
he was-
because
Oh, yes.
he worked for Wells Fargo
yeah,
and
I think
he was
that was kind of under,
help
under, you know,
orchestrate
as far
that.
as the
I think that's
financial.
right.
That
part of
sounds
it.
very familiar.
Yeah.
So, well,
Well, things,
That's a whole
now that
lot
you
of
talk
stuff.
about it, there's all sorts of stuff. So, what else? You know, another thing that I am very keen on at this club is the women's sailing seminar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's been going on, I don't know when it started.
I know that.
When did it
And
start?
you know why I know that?
Because you started it.
Yeah. 85.
That's
You and
just terrific.
Well,
Roz.
yeah, Roz,
Roz
and
and
I,
Jean.
and then Renee Soloway, we were kind of the three.
Mm-hmm.
And then Martha became very involved, you know, in the early years too.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, yeah, so anyway, the women's sailing seminar.
Yeah. I mean, I've put people that work for, women that work for me, put them into the sailing seminar, and then they became crew on Moonlight, of course.
Sure. Because you were so entrenched in so many of these sticky issues, were you approached to stay on for another year?
I may have been, but I wasn't going to do it.
You were
Yeah.
finished.
Yeah. In part because, I mean, it's sort of clear we need to put in more effort on the catering company.
Right.
So I switched off. There were good people behind me on.
That was also was that at the time set up as our for-profit arm, or was that later on?
Well, it was certainly set up to do the best business that we could, and it was not only obviously producing food for the dining room, but even more importantly,
For the
food for the
up here,
social
the
events.
events.
Yeah, and we, you know, we got good. It's always been women in here to manage the ballroom bookings and
Right.
events. Been great. So that, all of that, you know, was really important.
Yeah, yeah.
Really helped to turn things around.
Yeah, I both Peter and I were on the committee when it had sort of transitioned. I guess there was an outside couple that was involved in running it, or there was some kind of thing where we took it more. Michael Maraza that came in, and then also they needed to do some things relative to, you know, transfer payments, because, you know, you had
Gotta be careful.
part of the club paying for something else, and how
Yeah.
do you square that circle, you know?
Yeah, and it, you know, always a caution about don't let the IRS
Yeah,
Sure.
come in here again,
particularly.
please.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is all, it's just all about the upstairs ballroom operation.
Sure.
So be
Sure.
very careful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it's not done properly, it can be both a blessing and a curse.
Oh, believe me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of transferring money, I mean, this is just a fun little story. So the Women's Auxiliary, they had, you know, annual dues, like $30. And so, you know, so we had some money, and then the clothing store, you know, gave some money. So the club did not have a whole lot of money at that time, but
Right.
we had some money. So the club, of course, borrowed money from the Women's Auxiliary. So this young man, he became commodore, and his wife was with the auxiliary. And I think we're talking about, I may be wrong, but $30,000-$40,000 that the
Wow.
club owed us.
Yeah.
And I remember Martha, she said, I told my husband that you better pay up.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, is that true? Do you
Oh, I'm
remember
sure
that?
it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
That sounds like Martha.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
said, you just better pay up, and somehow the club was able to do that.
Pulled it off.
However, they
Yeah.
did it. But I mean, it literally went from, it
Yeah.
was,
It got
the
better.
club was not healthy.
Yeah.
Wealthy
The-
at that time,
the-
that's for sure.
Took a lot of work.
The auxiliary was saying we're not a bank here.
We're not a bank, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it was just, I just remember Martha saying, I just told my husband, and oh, good. Let's see what
That's-
happened.
I'm sure she
And,
did. Yes,
I
she
think
could
there
be
was
very convincing.
There was
Yes.
a check coming in.
Yeah.
So, another thing, you were talking about your boats and your sailing.
Mm.
I remember when you have just had a birthday,
Mm.
and happy birthday, and it's a big one.
Yes, it is.
And I remember when you, 30 years ago, had another big birthday.
Oh, yes.
And I think your birthday wish was to go in the Transpac.
It was, and we did.
You did.
Yes. Didn't make it.
You didn't
Oh
make it.
gosh. On your boat, you weren't crewing.
No.
No. This is a Santa Cruz 40.
Uh-huh.
Belonged to actually a friend of Hogg's, and now a friend of mine. But the short version is, took the Santa Cruz 40, was birthed here. We got it all provisioned and took off, went down the coast to the starting line, is, of course, at Long Beach, and started the race, and we got 600 miles down the course, and the head stay broke.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and we scrambled around. I mean, people jumping around to keep the mast from falling over. Used halyards to replace the head stay, and turned around and went home.
Wow.
Yeah, that was.
It was bad.
It
Yeah.
was. I think you had invited Peter along early on, because I remember we were having some meetings
Oh,
at your
yes.
house, but
Yeah.
then his back or whatever it was. So, but I just came across that again in
Yeah.
these old telltales. Picture of the skipper and you and.
Turned out the owner of the boat is not a member of the club. He knew that the swage fitting at the top of the hit stay was cracked.
It was starting out, it was
He
cracked.
knew it was cracked.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and he didn't tell us. He thought he'd just risk it. This is like, it was '93 when I was Commodore, and you know, the business was not good. It was not a good year, and this guy was a commercial real estate broker and wasn't doing well, and didn't have the money
To
to
fix it.
replace the stay.
Oh, gosh.
If he'd asked us, we probably could have done it. But
Yeah.
anyway, stuff
So
happens.
that was your only, that was the only sort of,
The only-
once in your life,
the only time.
desire to go in the ocean.
Transpec.
Yeah.
Well, what we discovered, so soon after that, so I was Commodore 93, 94, I bought Moonlight, Express 27, and learned that those boats routinely did the Coastal Cup, which was nonstop San Francisco to Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and if you have a trailerable boat, what you do is you drive the trailer to Santa Barbara. Then you come home, and you do the race, put the boat in the trailer, and drive home.
Yeah.
So you did that.
You don't have to go to Hawaii because it is thrilling. You know, going down the coast
That, yeah.
in a 27-foot ultra
Wow. Wow. So, did you do that several times?
6 times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and not in succeeding years. It was spaced out over time. Started out, you know, it was me and Snowman and Kel and, you know, good solid sailors. We had an absolute blast. And of course, you know, over the years I was training my sons to sail.
Right.
You know, today I can hardly get them on Moonlight because they're very good and they get called out on other people's boats.
Wow.
But anyway, the premium year was 2012. Moonlight did the race with an all Gibbs crew.
I remember that.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember that
Yeah.
one too.
Oh,
That
man.
was, yeah,
And the Telltale, I think, was still
Yeah, I'm
going
sure
out
it's,
some. I think we captured that.
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was.
That was, yeah.
And we, you know, it was our best run down the coast. We studied, you know, a big part of that race is actually, there are 2 big parts. One is surviving to Point Conception, and then you got to turn the corner, and the Santa Barbara Channel is light air, very challenging, got currents, and most boats who don't study the subject lose it getting from Conception to Santa Barbara. There was I don't know if you remember the Santa Barbara oil spill, but in '69, real disaster, and the federal government, I discovered, you know, rooting around, that the federal government paid for a study of currents in the Santa Barbara Channel to determine, so they could predict the next time there's an oil spill where the oil would go. Well, the study says, you know, there's a pattern, there's a steady pattern, current along the shore going from LA to Point Conception. It's like 2 or 3 knots.
So you'd be closer to the shore then?
Well, the problem was everybody would go close to the
Oh.
shore because it's the shortest distance.
Sure, sure.
We dove down by the Channel Islands where there's a current that goes that
Oh,
way,
okay.
and got down to Santa Cruz Island. It took us a day to get from the jive at Santa Cruz up to Santa Barbara. We killed everybody.
Wow.
We beat 70-foot
So
maxis.
you overshot the mark on purpose because then you could come back and make up for that.
Yeah.
And then the current, of course, was the offset to the light winds that
Yeah.
was.
Well, they were the guys who hug the shore, which everybody does. They're fighting against a 2 to 3 knot current. If you go down along the islands,
Yeah.
you're benefited by a 2 to 3 knot current.
Right. So you backdoored it.
Yeah.
So Jim, where do you see yourself? You're still out racing on
Yeah.
Moonlight.
Yeah.
with your sons
Yeah,
sometimes,
sometimes.
or not? Just
I'm
keep
still-
on going.
I'm just going to keep on going. You know, I'm a lot older now,
Well,
but I'm still holding together, and it's my passion. You know, Friday nights is it's like my drug,
Yeah.
and that's I keep recruiting more crew. Most of them are women who I've put into the women's sailing seminar.
okay, well,
Yeah.
that's
It works.
That's
it
great.
works. It works.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then, what was I going to say? What was I going? Oh, so when you think back over time, Friday night races,
Mhm.
back then, Friday night races, now,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that has changed.
Oh yeah.
Anything you think that we can do about it, or is it just, it's just the time we are in? that-
Yeah, one of the things that has been very important to me was trying to build the small boat racing component at the club.
Right,
I mean, I got the deck cleared off,
right.
recruited, you know, some Express 27 owners, young ones. I mean, I wasn't the only one. I mean, Kel was doing it too. So John Carney, Salty Hotel came in as a part of that effort.
The More 24, the little Nicholas.
Yeah, Nick DeVos and his wife, and one thing that really kicked off that effort to build up the dry sailing was at a midwinters, this young guy with a recently refurbished Express 27 called Tequila Mockingbird entered the race, and I said, it was new. I said, you know, you belong to a club? No.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
We got him, and he was great until they
stole him.
moved over to San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yeah. Now he's moved to New Zealand.
oh, okay. So you're not, I mean, do you think we can continue to expand on the sailors in the club, or do you think that it's, because it has kind of slowed down?
Oh yeah,
You
it
know,
definitely has.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our members, I think back, who was sailboat owners or racers, I mean, either
It's
are
a
not
smaller
doing it
number.
anymore or are powerboaters.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
You know, it's hard to, and the club doesn't have a lot of space to store
Right.
boats, either in the water or on the deck,
Right.
which is a bit of a handicap. You know, and you know, I was sort of behind the effort to, you know, borrow money, refurbish the club to make it, you know, a top-notch place for dining and
Sure.
socializing.
Sure.
Because I think that's, from a business standpoint, you just got to be good at that to keep this
Right.
place
Right.
whole. So,
Well, also to be a
Hard to say.
venue that can attract, you know, events like the folk boats, and that, I mean, this we've got as I said, a great backyard that you don't have to mow,
Right.
and you know, everyone loves to come here, so and you know, having that kind of visibility, you know, when people move here. That's why it's also important, I think, what they're doing in the harbor in terms of, you know, trying to follow the rules a little more closely,
yeah, right.
and not little side deals and what have you, which I think is good because, I mean, look at I don't know how many new members we got during COVID when we were closed, but I mean, people were joining then, you know, and I mean, that says a lot for the club.
Yeah, it's one thing that I'm really happy to see is that, you know, there are a lot of new members who are relatively young. They have young kids. You know, that is terrific. And because, you know, the kids, they're around the water, you can send them over to San Francisco to learn how to sail. We can use them as crew on
Absolutely.
on the boats that we have. You know, we're doing okay. I would love to, you know, have some hot idea to build things even more.
One thing that you know, I'm still on the membership committee, and there are several of our younger members that they have paddle boards and they have kayaks.
Yeah.
And I'm actually very active, you know, between those two types of being on the water. So there's a question is, you know, are there any space for that here, or are we having like little regattas, or
Right. In fact,
you know, maybe we can find some of these youngsters, and you know, it takes a village to get something going.
Yeah, yeah.
And instead of, you know, it's on one person, maybe have a little
Right. Almost like a committee.
or, you know, interesting together with somebody like you who knows the logistic of what is possible to do.
Yeah, in fact, Rosalind Brandt, I'm a member of the port committee.
Right.
And the port captain is bugging me because she's received a request for storage for SUPs. So it's coming.
Yeah.
It's,
And I think
it's a hot topic.
that would really be something that we could expand on and
Yes.
get sort of more water activity.
Yeah.
I came by one of the telltales way back, and that was Peter and I. We had a rowing boat.
Yeah.
We had a
Yes,
rowing boat.
we-
and we
right.
sold the
We bought their rowing boat
Oh, you bought it. Oh.
and then gave it back to them.
But anyway, so we had an invitational rowing regatta with 30-some boats
Oh,
that
wow.
were here.
Oh,
So
cool.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just something to think about. That,
Yeah.
that maybe getting the younger people out
Right.
and doing something
Right.
like that.
That's also part of the impetus for doing these talks, these conversations, because they're all posted, and we're fortunate in that we've got probably 15 to 20 hours worth of interviews so far with people that transcend generations. You know, some of whom are no longer with us, but with Bob, Bob and who do we do it? He talked about all of that whole period in much greater detail about the financial issues that we ran into.
Is that with Turnbull?
Yeah, yeah.
Did he pass away?
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
Several of the people we have. It's what happens. You know?
Yeah, I'm glad you got him.
It's a part of life, but the whole idea was that it's never quite as crystallized if you've got to sort of recreate stuff forensically and you're skipping over a generation. We've talked with people who were here when, and that's why this was important, because there were some fundamental changes that took place. So that's another way also of demonstrating to people that a club is dynamic, and you're part of that dynamism. You know, by being active in it, and you know, it's a social club, but it's more than that. You know, it's for some people. I mean, it's probably kept Will alive, to be quite honest. This is a place he can come. He'll be here tonight and all of that, and you know, so it's in the bloodstream for many people.
Yeah.
do you feel like that? I mean, do you feel like you have been here for a long time?
Long time,
I mean,
yeah.
we have been here for a long time. And for Peter and I, the club is kind of like our second home. It's
Yeah.
a place you can always come to. There's always somebody you know. There's always something going.
Yeah.
Do you feel?
Yeah,
and
that's.
your eyes.
I mean, the glue for me, obviously, is
Sailing.
racing
Having fun.
my boat.
Right.
And one of my favorite people is Marcus Canestra. I mean, that guy keeps the program going.
Yeah.
He loves it.
He really does.
He really
You know.
enjoys it, which is he's a treasure. But now that maybe I should find a way to find a successor to the storage thing. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna
Or clean it up maybe, in the sense of,
yeah.
no, anyway.
But the whole thing, the thing of, you know, the dinghy, kayak, paddleboard storage is full. And I think it is. Ron Kell is on top of that. So I'm going to talk to him this weekend. And we'll get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
But we're going to need, out of the young people who are active, one thing that we may need to do is actually create a floating storage thing. San Francisco has. You can just go and take a picture of it. It's a rack on a float, and which is, you know, handy. It's right on the
Right.
water, easy to get your stuff in and out. May need to invest in that. So anyway, we'll
Yeah.
Anyway, there's always something to be done.
see. There is.
But I would say thank you so
Yeah,
much
thanks,
for
Jim.
coming here and spending some time
Yeah.
and tell us your story. And
Well, it's fun.
and
Yeah.
it is fun, and it's something we appreciate,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and
We try to get more people to, you know, go in to look at these. And what we've been trying to do also is periodically, Walt Johnson he does a phenomenal job of research. He's been researching each of the staff commodores and writing a little biography.
that's next for you.
Uh-oh.
This is the easy part. Now
He's-
comes the really tough part.
He's still in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So you've got some time, but he. What I try to do is coordinate with him and with the rest of the committee, and I created what we call the History and Artifacts Corner in the crier. And every once in a while,
cool.
when there's a story in there, like the one with the guy with the monkey, and what that was all about, and then the bear that was in the. So there's a lot of lore that we can capture, and hopefully people read some of that stuff, and then it's sort of a teaser, and then we get them to actually go to the actual article, and we have a History and Artifacts website that's linked to the Corinthian website.
Oh, cool.
So we've sort of, I mean, we've gotten everything in order now. Mike has gotten some wonderful scanning equipment. So not only do we have this stuff, but so much of it is now digitized. So
great.
it will be preserved.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, because we had these albums that are like, you know, sort of falling apart, you know.
Yeah.
And we got our baseball bats up here from when they played baseball out at Paradise Cove in 1910.
Well,
There used to be a club baseball game.
Well, I think we should again say thank you
Yeah.
so much for you.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
pleasure.
do we
Yeah.
need to hit a red button or green button or whatever?